I want you to, picture the scene for a second. It's late on a Wednesday night, specifically Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026.
Right, so most people are already asleep.
Exactly. Or, aggressively winding down for the night. The streets around Queen's Park in Toronto are just completely quiet. But inside the provincial legislature, it is a drastically different story.
Oh, completely different world in there.
Yeah. The chambers are sparsely populated, sure, but the government side is wide awake. And they are pushing through this massive $244.2 billion piece of legislation.
Which is just wild. It paints quite a picture, honestly, governing under the cover of darkness, essentially.
It really does.
It's a setting that automatically makes you wonder, what is so urgent that it couldn't wait for regular daytime business hours?
That is the exact question hovering over this whole thing. Because this isn't just like a standard piece of accounting. It's an omnibus budget bill, Bill 97. And tucked deep inside this colossal financial document is this sweeping change that fundamentally rewrites the rules of what the public is legally allowed to know about their own government.
It radically alters the very boundary between the state and the citizen. We're looking at a profound shift in government transparency here.
And it was passed into law while most of the province was quite literally sleeping.
Yeah, literally.
So we have a massive stack of sources for this deep dive today. We're looking at breaking news reports, direct political statements, and deep legislative analysis from today, Thursday, April 23rd, 2026.
Because the bill just passed right around lunchtime today.
Exactly. So our mission here is to decode exactly how a routine-sounding budget bill became this fast-track vehicle for a highly controversial, retroactive rewrite of Ontario's Freedom of Information laws.
Which is a huge deal.
It is. We are going to explore why you, the listener, need to understand this intense tug-of-war happening right now over your right to government transparency. Okay, let's unpack this because we really need to start with the sheer mechanics of how this even happened. We are dealing with an omnibus bill.
Right, and that is the critical first piece of the puzzle. An omnibus bill is, it's essentially a legislative mega package.
Oh,
It doesn't just do one thing. It attempts to legislate across multiple, often completely unrelated domains all at the exact same time.
Because when you look at the text of Bill 97, it is dizzying. It's a budget bill, so obviously it dictates the province's finances. But then it just pivots.
Oh, it pivots hard.
Yeah. It merges Ontario's conservation authorities. It extends the One Fair Transit program. It cuts taxes for small businesses.
And it paves the way for that massive redevelopment on the lot right outside the Rogers Centre in downtown Toronto.
Right. And then starting next week, it caps the resale prices of event tickets.
Which, let's be honest, is a highly popular move. Capping ticket scalpers is a guaranteed crowd pleaser that, dominates the headlines.
For sure. But burying all these things together, it feels a lot like the terms and conditions popped up on a new software update.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right. You get this giant wall of dense legal text, but you really just want to use the new features on your phone, so you scroll rapidly to the bottom and click Accept.
Without realizing you just gave away the rights to your firstborn in, Clause 47.
Exactly. They bury massive fundamental changes inside this giant document that everyone is heavily pressured to accept. But I have to ask, is it actually unusual for a government to fast-track a budget bill like this?
What?
Or is this just standard political maneuvering and the opposition is just doing their job by throwing a tantrum about it?
I mean, the opposition is definitely playing their traditional role, yeah. But the way this was done is genuinely turning heads among legislative experts.
Really? How so?
Well, to understand why, you have to look at the mechanical reality of the normal legislative process. Usually, a bill of this magnitude, touching this many different laws, goes to the committee stage.
Right.
It sits there for weeks, sometimes months. This is where the actual friction of democracy happens. Affected groups, legal scholars, journalists, and regular members of the public come in to testify.
So it's a whole ordeal.
Yeah, it's where the government and the opposition propose line-by-line amendments, they debate the finer points, and they scrutinize the text for unintended consequences.
So it's designed to be slow. It's designed to be a bit of a grind.
Deliberately so, yeah. That friction is the safeguard.
Yeah.
But in this case, the government bypassed that machinery entirely.
They just skipped it.
Completely. They skipped the public hearings. They skipped the committee stage. They scheduled a rare late-night session, debated it until 10 p.m. Wednesday, and then pushed it through to a final vote today.
Right before the legislature breaks for a week-long constituency week.
Exactly. Pass the mega bill and then just leave town.
Wow. But why bundle it all together in the first place? Like, what's the strategy?
It's because of the political trap it creates. Think of it like being offered a life-saving medicine, but it's baked inside a poisoned apple.
Okay, I'm following.
You can't take one without swallowing the other. By packaging wildly popular items like the cap on ticket scalping or a much-needed small business tax cut.
Which nobody wants to vote against.
Exactly. By putting those alongside highly controversial items like the freedom of information changes, you force lawmakers into an all-or-nothing vote.
Oh, I see.
If an opposition member votes against the bill because they are terrified of the transparency changes, the government instantly clips that vote.
Yeah.
They run attack ads saying, look, they voted against lowering your taxes and stopping ticket scalpers.
Wow.
It fundamentally shifts how laws are scrutinized, turning a nuanced, multifaceted debate into a very blunt binary weapon.
So they trapped the opposition into passing this bill under severe political pressure. What exactly did they smuggle through in the process then? Because the clause we are focusing on isn't about small business taxes or concert tickets.
No.
We are talking about the Freedom of Information, or FOI, clampdown.
And this is the absolute core of the controversy. Freedom of information laws are the mechanical gears by which journalists, researchers, and everyday citizens can formally compel the government to hand over internal documents.
Right. It is how we see how the sausage is made, basically.
Exactly.
And under this new law tucked into the budget, the premier, all 28 cabinet ministers, and their entire staff are now completely shielded from public access to their documents.
It's a massive shield.
We are talking about emails, text messages, phone records, calendars, anything created during their government work. It is completely removed from the public sphere.
And we actually know the exact catalyst for this. The government hasn't even attempted to hide the timeline. The trigger was a specific court order from this past January.
Stemming from an FOI request filed by Global News, right?
Yes.
The media organization was trying to get the premier's personal cell phone call logs from November 2022.
And the timing of November 2022 is the key detail here. That was the exact month the government announced its highly controversial plans to remove protected land from the Greenbelt to allow for housing development.
So journalists wanted to know who the premier was talking to on his personal phone during the time those multi-billion-dollar land decisions were being formulated.
Precisely. The Information and Privacy Commissioner looked at the case, supported the media's request, and the court legally ordered the premier to begin the process of releasing those logs.
But the premier refused. And instead of complying with the judge, we get this brand new law buried in the spring budget. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, brace yourself for this one.
This law isn't just about protecting his personal phone records from November 2022. The legislation is entirely retroactive. It goes all the way back to 1988.
That is the detail that is sending shockwaves through legal circles right now.
Wait, retroactively changing a law to 1988. How can a government legally pass a law today that reaches back 4 decades to cancel ongoing court cases?
It sounds impossible, right?
Yeah. By making it retroactive, they immediately killed dozens of ongoing media requests, and they rendered 3 separate ongoing court decisions completely moot. I genuinely don't understand the legal mechanics of this. How does a law reach backward in time to unbreak a rule?
It is a staggering flex of power, for sure. But we have to understand a foundational concept in our legal system, which is parliamentary supremacy.
Okay, what does that mean in this context?
In a system of parliamentary supremacy, the legislature doesn't just play the game. They own the casino and they print the rule book.
So if a judge rules against them based on the rulebook, they just print a new one.
Precisely. The courts interpret the law, but the legislature creates the law. As long as the issue doesn't violate the fundamental constitutional rights laid out in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and Freedom of Information Access, is a statutory right, not a charter right. The legislature is supreme.
Wow.
By making this law retroactive to 1988, they are legally telling the courts that ruling you made in January. You made it based on a version of reality that we are now declaring never legally existed.
That is wild.
It completely wipes the slate clean. It neutralizes the previous court orders because the legal foundation those orders were built on has been retroactively erased from the history books.
That is a terrifyingly effective legal maneuver. But before we get into the political fallout, I need to understand how the FOI process actually works. Because if a journalist asks for the premier's phone records, does the government just hand over a raw Excel sheet with all of his private contacts and family texts?
Oh, not at all. And that's a crucial mechanical distinction. When an FOI request is approved, it doesn't just get emailed straight to a reporter.
Okay.
It goes through an incredibly rigorous process handled by nonpartisan civil servants. They physically go through the documents and apply redactions. It's a severing process.
Severing meaning they literally black out the parts that aren't public business.
Exactly. If there is a text to a spouse, it is blacked out. If there is a phone number of a private citizen who called to complain about a pothole, that personal identifying information is legally required to be redacted under privacy laws before the document is ever released.
Right.
The only things that survive the redaction process are details explicitly related to the conduct of government business.
Okay, that mechanical reality is vital to keep in mind because it sits at the absolute center of the clash between how the government is defending this move and how the opposition is attacking it.
Very true.
Let's look at the government's defense first. The premier's argument hinges almost entirely on constituent privacy.
Right, because the premier has always cultivated a very specific man-of-the-people brand of retail politics. He is famous for giving out his personal cell phone number directly to the public.
Yeah, he takes calls at all hours from regular people who are having issues with the bureaucracy. And his argument in question period was that if he releases his call logs, he would be breaching the confidentiality of those everyday citizens. He stated flatly that if he posted the information of the people who called him with confidential issues, he'd face, quote, more lawsuits than you could shake a stick at.
He is vigorously framing this retroactive law not as a shield for himself, but as a protective measure for the general public. And his cabinet ministers are uniformly echoing this defense today.
Yes, Stephen Crawford, the Minister of Public Business, claimed to reporters that even with these changes, Ontario remains the quote, gold standard for transparency.
Suggesting they are just bringing their rules into alignment with other jurisdictions.
Right. And Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy argued that absolutely no rights are being taken away. He also pointed out that public consultations were held before the budget was even tabled, implying this was a fully democratic process.
Though we should note, when reporters pressed Bethlenfalvy on whether any members of the public actually asked for freedom of information laws to be restricted during those consultations, he couldn't name a single one.
Right. Which is pretty telling.
What's fascinating here is the massive clash between the premier's highly informal style of governing, literally handing out his cell number at press conferences, and the rigid legal requirements of government record-keeping.
It's a huge disconnect.
Yeah, the FOI system was designed for an era of official typed memos and formal boardroom meetings. It is struggling to adapt to a premier who conducts high-level state business via text message on a personal device.
Let's pivot to the opposition stance, because they are not buying the privacy defense for a single second.
Not at all.
And they are using that exact redaction mechanism you just explained to tear holes in the premier's argument. They are pointing out that any private citizen's phone number would be blacked out by civil servants anyway, so the lawsuit threat is completely hollow.
They view the privacy argument as a complete smokescreen. The language coming from the opposition leaders across the board is incredibly sharp and aggressive today.
Interim Liberal leader John Fraser stood in the legislature and outright called it a, quote, cover-up of a cover-up.
Yeah, he didn't hold back.
He spoke directly to the premier, saying that because they are going to the extreme length of making this retroactive to kill a court order, quote, there must be something really, really, really bad on your cell phone. What is it?
And NDP leader Marit Stiles hit the exact same note. She accused the government of deliberately using the cover of night and a fast-tracked process to hide, quote, shady dealings and secrets from the public and the media.
Her core argument being that the public has a fundamental right to verify how their tax dollars are being spent and why massive decisions are made.
Exactly.
And then Green Party leader Mike Schreiner went even further, tying this specific FOI clampdown to a broader cloud hovering over the administration. He said the premier is rewriting the laws because his government is, quote, plagued by scandals, RCMP investigations, and accusations of corruption. And that this bill is just a blunt instrument to hide it all from the people of Ontario.
To truly understand why the opposition and journalists across the province, for that matter, are fighting so fiercely to protect these FOI laws, You have to look at the track record of what those laws have actually unearthed in the recent past.
Right, these aren't just abstract academic concepts. Freedom of information requests are the exact investigative tools that brought the massive Greenbelt scandal to light in the first place.
Absolutely.
It was through FOI documents that we found out the government had mistakenly released 150 prisoners. It was FOI that exposed the hidden architectural details and costs of the Ontario Place Spa redevelopment.
Which was huge news.
Yeah, and it revealed the internal engineering reports behind the Science Center closure and uncovered over $100 million in government advertising spending.
None of those stories started with a government press release. All of those stories, which dominated the news cycle and forced real accountability, started as dry, formal, legal requests for internal emails and memos.
Wow.
By passing this new law, the government has essentially severed that specific, vital artery of information flowing from the cabinet room to the public.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for you, the listener. Why should you care about the minutia of freedom of information legislation? I mean, on the surface, it sounds incredibly bureaucratic.
It does.
But the sources make it clear that this isn't just an isolated incident.
No. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that this late-night, fast-track budget bill fits perfectly into a very clear, broader pattern of how this specific government operates.
The reporting outlines a string of recent examples where traditional legislative debate and transparency were actively bypassed. We've seen fast-track laws banning municipalities from using speed cameras. We've seen sudden laws closing supervised consumption sites. Legislation drastically boosting the education minister's powers over local school boards.
And perhaps most notably, Bill 5, which essentially gave the provincial government the sweeping power to suspend municipal laws entirely in the name of economic development or mining.
It reveals a governing philosophy that explicitly prioritizes speed, efficiency, and executive action over traditional parliamentary friction, consultation, and debate.
When a government holds a majority, they have the raw power to do this. But the compounding effect is that it continually removes the public's ability to see the work being done.
Right.
Freedom of information laws fundamentally dictate the boundary between the state and the citizen. They are often the only tool the public has to independently verify the narrative a government is presenting on any given day.
It's the literal difference between taking a politician's word for why a multi-billion-dollar highway is being built and actually reading the text messages sent between developers and ministers the night before the decision was announced.
Precisely. Without FOI access to the premier and his cabinet, the public is entirely reliant on heavily curated press releases, staged photo ops, and official announcements to understand the actions of the highest offices in the province.
It replaces independent verification with state-sponsored messaging.
Yeah, exactly.
So what does this all mean when you strip away the political theater? You know, the late-night sittings, the shouting in question period, the distraction of the ticket scalping debate. What is the ultimate impact this has on the public's ability to hold elected officials accountable?
The ultimate impact is a drastic narrowing of the window into the government's inner workings. The decisions will still be made, the billions of tax dollars will still be spent.
Right.
But the public's ability to retrace the steps of those decisions, to see who influenced them, who lobbied for them, and how they came to be, has been permanently reduced.
Yeah.
And this raises an important question: what stands out to you when balancing government efficiency with public transparency? Because there is always a natural tension there. We want our governments to act decisively, to fix urgent problems without being bogged down in endless bureaucratic red tape. But we also demand to know that they are acting ethically, legally, and in the public's best interest. Where exactly is the line?
It's a massive question with no easy answer. To wrap this up, we've just witnessed the passage of an omnibus budget bill, heavily debated under the cover of night, in a sparsely populated chamber.
Right.
It brings popular tangible changes like cheaper concert tickets and transit fares, but it is heavily padded with a profound, retroactive overhaul of government transparency.
It literally kills a judge's court order aimed at the premier's phone records.
Exactly. It nullifies 4 decades of FOI access to cabinet ministers and permanently shields the political side of the government from this specific type of public scrutiny.
It was a very strategic, very blunt use of parliamentary supremacy.
And it leaves us with a final, lingering thought to explore.
Mm-hmm.
We live in an era where the lines between our personal devices and our professional lives are entirely blurred.
Oh, completely.
Most of us answer work emails on the same phone we use to text our families. If a government can retroactively decide that the personal devices they use to conduct official state business are entirely off limits to the public, citing personal privacy. How do we redefine the very concept of a public record for the digital age?
It's a huge philosophical shift.
Are we ultimately okay with the massive decisions shaping our province happening in a digital space that we are legally barred from ever seeing? As you turn off the lights tonight, it's something deeply worth thinking about.